afternoon. It is another beautiful day here in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. My name is Steve Moak. I am the unlicensed counselor. So grateful, as always, to be here. And I want to start out saying a couple thank yous to some folks, obviously to our sponsors, but to also our hosts here who do all the technology, our producers, our friends here at Star Worldwide Networks. Just an absolute class act organization that has helped really us launch this. If you get a chance, you can go and find our podcast on all the platforms. But really go to Star Worldwide Networks. You're going to see not only my show, but a lot of other shows as well. I want to say big thanks to Dave Pratt and team over there as well. And again, pay a couple bills. We want to thank our friends over at ShareTech. You know ShareTech by now. The DNA-confirmed at-home drug and alcohol screen, the most comprehensive drug test on the market. Don't let your loved one continue to use. Use the ShareTech test. Go to betterdrugtest.com. Pick one of those up. I guarantee you, you're going to find out if they're using something as well. And then our friends at EasySheets.club as well. Again, whether you're a short-term rental host or you just want to maybe have a variety of sheets in your life, try the Bamboo, try the Brooklyn, and go through, pick them. We press them, professionally clean them, ship them right to your door. Sleep like you're in a resort every single night, not just when you're at a resort. And again, I want to say big thanks to my friends at Stitch Fix. Not wearing them today, but I'm telling you, pretty soon somebody's going to send me a box instead of me having to pay for them. And it wouldn't be an ad spiel without me plugging. Go to the Unlicensed Counselor. If you like what you hear, want to book a little bit more time with me. I only have a few spots per week, but I do like to do deeper dive with folks as well too. It's just fun. I mean, again, this is what I enjoy doing. So if you really want to kind of get maybe an unconventional point of view from a counseling perspective, I'm happy to book some time with you and do a little bit deeper. Okay, so we've talked a lot about addiction on this show, since we started. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm passionate about it. We will continue to talk addiction. But again, this entire podcast was never intended to be solely about addiction. Now, we happen to land on April 20th, aka 420, aka the National Pot Smoking Holiday last Thursday, So, you couldn't go a show and not be talking about the weed and the weed culture and kind of the pervasiveness and how it went from reefer madness to now being the wonder drug, and it's really somewhere in between. But I do want to move away from addiction a skosh today and at least cover a couple other topics as well, too. I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. My feed, my business has been in behavioral health, from working in the treatment centers to building businesses within the behavioral health world. And one of the words, there's two words that kind of, I don't know if they drive me crazy, but they are so overused kind of within the behavioral health space. And when a word gets overused, it loses the impact of it. And the first word that comes to mind when I talk about this is trauma. Right? So this may be unpopular opinion today, but not everything is trauma. And I want to open that up and discuss it a little bit and kind of share some of my thoughts on that as well, too. And the other word that I get sick and tired of hearing is stigmatized or stigma as well, too. We're going to save that for another show, but there's certain words, and, I see my feed is just filled with behavioral health folks, whether it's clinicians, psychologists, doctors, NPs, you name it. These are folks that just, I can almost play post bingo and see how many sentences it takes for them to hit on the word trauma or stigmatized or something like that. And I'm almost batting 1,000 when you start discussing certain topics. But today, I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about trauma. So, look, there is significant trauma that happens to people and that they experience in their life that will never go away, right? I am not here to minimize that. I'm not here to put that down. It is extremely valid and should be discussed with a professional. But I am a big proponent of starting to move forward and not staying stuck with that trauma and not staying as kind of a victim in that as well, too. But my bigger point today that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is just that not everything is trauma. And if you go on social media and if you read articles by all the major news publications, you're going to feel like every single thing and every single person in this world has trauma. And when we overuse a word, it starts to mean less and less. And it really negates the people who have had sexual assault, criminal acts, against them, murder, violence. I mean, there are big, big things that really can impact your life. And I actually heard a definition, where was it? I'm going to go to my notes here, that I thought was interesting. For it to be trauma, it must have rewired your brain, right? And I thought that was a really good way of kind of framing it, of kind of getting away from a bad thing happened to me and made me sad, and maybe that lingers a little bit, to an act that has physically, neurologically changed how I view things, how I feel things, and the long-lasting impact that goes along with that. So take a mental note of that, folks, as you're out there, and maybe you've been one of the persons who said, I've had trauma in my life, and I've probably been guilty of that in my life, and I look back in my own. But like for me, something that I might have said in a previous time is I moved around a lot as a kid, right? We were from Kentucky and Ohio, and we moved to Arizona. But even within all of those areas, we would move often, frequently. And it's like, okay, is that really trauma? I mean, yes, was I having to change schools and make new friends and things like that? But I don't even think, as I step back and look on it, that's traumatic. Is it challenging, a little frustrating? Does it maybe create some behavior patterns and some things as a young child where you're constantly having to adapt? But I don't believe that rewired my brain. And in fact, it may have created some resiliency within me that has maybe only shown up later in life because of the ability to adapt and change with new circumstances, or to meet people and things like that. So I would counter that there might actually be some positive that comes from that. There's also a kind of an old saying of, what is just ordinary misery, right? And I don't know if misery has just gone away. You've either gone to depression or to trauma. And there's a couple steps before you get to that, folks. And I want to make sure that we're talking about that. Trauma's real. If you have those significant instances, please seek counseling in order to hopefully move through that and not just continually rehash it. So again, we're not staying stuck at that. But I really do think that there is an acceptance, and we got to start talking about the ability to move on as well, too. Now, here's one of the other things that I see a lot with trauma is now associated with words, right? People are saying things to you. I've seen this in stand-up comedy. I'm a huge stand-up comic fan. I like to go to shows when they're here. I try and keep up with kind of the newest, latest, greatest hotcaks. There's a guy named Mark Norman. He's absolutely hilarious, but he is ruthless at the same time. He will take on any group, race, socioeconomic status. I mean, you name it, and he is just ruthless. And I've seen him, get ripped by people and for attacking them and things like that, and saying that they've been traumatized. And this happens on college campuses when speakers go to them, and maybe you don't agree with their political philosophy or point of view or things like that. And as it pertains to trauma, I just want to step back and say, these are words, folks. These are words. And please don't classify, the traumas that people have really experienced in their lifetime with you saying you've been traumatized because you heard some words that you don't like or don't agree with. And again, that negates the folks who have really been through this. And I think I just wanted to say that out loud, that these are just words. Let it wash over you, and then let it go and move on. And if somebody posts something on social media, you know what you can do? Just keep scrolling. You can just keep moving. You don't have to respond, and your sanity will be in check, and you're not going to get 100 comments and go viral and tweets, and all of a sudden your world spins out. You can just keep trucking. You don't like what you're hearing on TV, you can change the channel, turn it off. Same with the radio, podcast, whatever it is. Maybe you don't like this podcast. Keep moving. I get it, but we don't need to kind of build these things up into such a way that it's going to impact you. So again, just think about it. If you're hearing something that you don't like, just keep moving, right? And by the way, I know a lot of us are wired differently, right? Like if your personality is such that, these things seem to offend you or get to you, now that may be something you actually want to bring up to your counselor to start discussing as well too, is be like, look, for some reason I feel impacted by words and actions, and they seem to get to me a little bit more. I'm not going to sit here and try and diagnose what that may be for the person that's listening or watching this at home right now, but that could be something to bring up. We have gotten softer as a society. That just is what it is. And I just read an article this week that said Gen Z is the most difficult to work with. That's coming from survey of employers as well, too, and how often they get fired within the first few weeks. It's not a shot at anybody, but I do think it's this culture that they've been brought up in is really changed dynamics, and now it's starting to show up in the workplace, and that's really unfortunate. And I do think kind of this trauma/victim mentality could be significantly contributing to a lot of this as well too. Okay, so Steve, you're talking about trauma, and how do we kind of move forward through this? I'm not going to sit here and say I have an example. It's one size fits all. But first off, if your therapist is sitting there and beating you over the head with the victim and the trauma mentality, I would say maybe shop that therapist, maybe not believe that therapist. I am just not into being shamed or being told that I am a victim for all of these things. I do think it is healthy to discuss these things. I'm a big believer in kind of hitting problems and things head on. It may not be an appropriate way, depending on exactly what's going on in your world, or using some type of, exposure therapy to kind of address these situations and hopefully make progress and move forward. Again, I'm not saying that for folks who've experienced this, they will ever get past them in their entire lifetime. But I have seen people, gosh, I wish I could remember the name of the gentleman who dove into a pool, broke his neck that day, and was never able to walk again, right? That's a significant trauma. And the story goes that he made a decision that day that this wasn't going to, impact the rest of his life in that way and let him become a victim and feel sorry. And he graduated school and went on to be a renowned speaker, and is a very well-known individual as well, too. And I was just reading it and didn't write his name down in my notes to be able to reference it. But again, it's just a small example of you can set the course of how you want to do it here first. Here, again, Steve, great pod as you point to your brain. Doesn't really translate as folks drive and listening to this in their car right now. But you can set that in your brain and start to chart a course forward. And that doesn't have to be the singular event that dictates every other thing that happens and how you respond to things and how you have relationships with people the rest of your life. And I think that that's really important. And I just kept seeing trauma and trauma and trauma, and every single thing is trauma. And I'm here to say not everything is trauma. And I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I am sorry to those that have experienced real trauma, but it's a ripoff of the word, and to those that have suffered by now taking trauma and applying it to a stand-up show that you didn't like, or the teacher, didn't take your assignment past this, or whatever the heck that it is, right? So let's just remember that you can be just sad, you can be just depressed, before you ever go into full-on trauma. And by the way, this is not a competition for who suffers the most in life, right? Okay, and it feels like we're in this some whacked out race of who's the biggest victim, I have this, and I have suffered through this. And I'm sure it's social media, and I'm not going to just be some boomer to rant against, social media stuff. But I mean, yes, does it contribute? You bet your butt. It absolutely does. So let's just pause. Let's stop internalizing every little bad thing that pops up in your life and putting that badge of trauma on you, and then posting about it for everyone else to try and get those sympathy likes back at you. It's not good for you. It's not healthy. It's not going to advance you, and it's not going to serve you, right? So I really wanted to take a few minutes and call that out here. And hopefully, kind of this maybe sparks a little nugget in your brain today. Maybe it'll make you rethink some of the ways you talk about it, some of the ways you view activities that have happened to you. Maybe it's something that you can bring up and discuss with your therapist. Maybe you can say, Steve, just pound sand. I want to just live in my trauma world, and that's the lens I want to view the rest of the world from. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. I don't think it's going to serve you. I don't think you're going to be very happy. I don't think the people who are going to be around you are going to be very happy. But more power to you. That is what I wanted to kind of kick the show off and talk a little bit about today. So Interesting stuff. I think it's interesting when I get, like I always say, if I get too fired up, I want to bring it up on the show. But that was kind of part one of a two-part front end to the show. And then we'll get to a question that I got sent in as well, too. The next topic I wanted to get to real quick is it's kind of making its way on in the medical world and the integrative care world, and that is psilocybin, mushrooms, LSD. It's the new medicine. It's the cure for PTSD. It's the cure for depression. It's the cure for. I mean, when are we going to learn, folks? I mean, first off, let's call things what they are, fads and trends, right? Am I all for research? If there, molecules and specific things in these plants that may have some great medical application, let's research it like hell. Right? Let's find something, if there's something we can extract and apply that in a medical, clinically tested and validated way that can help people with depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever it is. I am all for that. But what I am not for is for every other person that's coming out saying that I just went to Jamaica and did, a 5-day trip where it's now legal to take psychedelics down there, and I now have the cure for all medicines, right? The cure for all of these illnesses and things like that. Okay. First off, there's no free lunches in nature. I've taken mushrooms dozens of times. By the way, great, sure. I'm not here to endorse drugs that are recreationally. I understand it expands your mind, makes you think differently, view things differently. Like, I get it. I didn't come out of that and go, boy, man, does that medicine make me feel better, right? Now, are there different ways that are titrated and dosed and things like that? Sure, I'm sure that there probably is. I'm not an expert in how the medical application or the microdosing is go. But don't sit here and tell me that the same thing that I've seen people check in for the treatment center that I worked at, right, for microdosing, LSD, mushrooms, all of those types of things, is now a wonder drug that can cure you from all these other things. Look, let's research it. Let's find out. And then let's explore it once it's all regulated in a much better way. But right now I'm seeing these pop-up shops and fly-by-night. I mean, it's ecstasy one week, it's ketamine, it's mushrooms now, it's LSD. I mean, are you getting the picture? Is everybody, just wake up a little bit. Here's another interesting little nugget. Oftentimes, these organizations and CEOs and people are, I don't know if I want to call them recovering people, actually, but these are people who have struggled with addiction in the past, who now are building businesses where you get to use drugs. Now, interesting. Okay. Not saying that they can't do that if it's within the rules and laws and regulations of kind of the lands and wherever this is happening, more power to you. I'm all for this, but I do find it curious that people who have had addiction issues are now searching for ways, very similar to what we've done with marijuana, to now be able to bring a drug, tout these benefits so that it can now be used. Are we calling this adult use, or are we calling it medical? I know that changes week to week, as we've talked about in other podcasts. But they're finding ways to now incorporate drugs under the guise of medicine, which is really giving a free pass to somebody who has had an addiction issue in the past to go out and participate in this drug use, but claim it's for a medical benefit. I'm not saying everybody that's doing that, but I do see it a lot. I do see it a lot. And it's just the nature of the beast. So all those people who are out there touting the benefits, here's another little nugget as well, too. I'm seeing these studies, and I follow all these studies that come out talking about abstinent over a 6-month period, 7th-month period of when they've used this, mushrooms or LSD or microdosing. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll read the study. How do we track those folks? And how are we getting that they were absent? Oh, they self-reported. Excuse me? Self-reported. Yeah. No, we emailed them, we called them, we talked to them, said they haven't done anything. Okay. Look, folks, I get it. We're trying new things. You own a business. You want to write a white paper. You want to have a study that kind of supports your position that shows improvement on this thing. I get it. And again, hopefully there is benefit, but don't sit here and tell me that self-reporting on a study 6, 9, 12 months out without any randomized drug or alcohol screening and claim that as a victory in the benefit of the mushrooms and psilocybin and LSD and microdosing and all these types of things, right? It's just, it shouldn't even be clinically allowed in terms of a study to just self-report. I mean, again, I can be self-reporting as I'm taking a drink and, doing a line or doing whatever it is the heck that I want to do. So I'm just saying, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Like if you're interested in these treatments, more power to you, right? More power to you. Explore it. I would also consult with an MD as well as the folks that you're going with as well on the natural, integrative, holistic, whatever you want to call it, route, and make sure that you're seeing both sides of it, because I'm not sure you're going to see exactly the whole picture from the organization that's trying to push you onto this certain path. And look, hopefully they find something that can help from a medical perspective, but just it's a trend right now. They're popping up here in Arizona. They're popping up all over the country. You're seeing this more and more in kind of the behavioral health world, often touted by the people who are trying to sell you their products. Pump the brakes, slow down, recognize this may be a fad. Let's let time do a little bit more due diligence. Let's get some actual long-term studies that I would claim are more valid on this. And then let's continue to explore it. Like, not here to bash it, even though that sounds like a bashing, right? But let's give it a little bit more time, and let's not rush to judgment that we found the next wonder drug and the next miracle drug that's going to cure all these, that, and other things. And again, I'm just not into this big pharma, this big conspiracy theory that pharma's been keeping these natural medicines down and things like that. No, they've been drugs that people have used recreationally for decades. I think we need to take a little break and a breather and just go, okay, let's explore these and put them through all the regular trials that other medicines would go through and see where they stand up, right? That's all I'm saying. Okay, all right. Enough of that. From trauma to mushrooms. Let's talk the last few minutes on one other little topic, but this one came actually from an email I got from somebody who's listening to the show. And again, thanks for liking, subscribing, sharing, reviewing. I'm getting a lot of great comments on Instagram, and actually building up some followers is there too. So please follow me on Instagram. Really appreciate it. But the question was, how can diet and exercise help my mood, and how do I start this? Right? Love it. Love how you're thinking, first off, and thanks for submitting the question. So diet and exercise, I'm not sure if there's anything more important. Now, sleep.